Hello everyone, and welcome to the second of our six Ghibli specials here at the Duke of York's. Today's question is going to be how Totoro, which is regarded to be one of the more simple Ghibli films, is actually one of the most complex of the Ghibli films. I'm Adam Dobay and I'm a host for this series. I come from a film theory and screenwriting background and also worked on localizing the Wind Rises for the Hungarian release of the film back in 2013. So it's fair to say that I've devoted most of my research work to these Studio Ghibli films, and I've selected some of the most interesting things that I've learned about these films for these introductions. And of course, as always, there's going to be a Q&A and discussion in the bar upstairs after the film if you want to join. You can also hop over to my blog at followthemoonrabbit.com, where I put up a full guide to all of the Studio Ghibli films. So however many films you're visiting this time around, or if you're interested in all of the rest, you can go up there and get that. Quick show of hands, who's seen this film before? Okay, so it's 99.9%. I wouldn't have accepted anything less. Thank you. Who's seen this more than 5 times? 99.8%. That's really good. Yeah, okay. So fair to say you're familiar with this film. With that, it's time to start this film's introduction. Sorry for the back pun. So basically, what I want to talk about is that Totoro is totally underrated. It's this weird thing. It's the most likely studio film to be written off, even when critics admire the beautifully handcrafted animation and the children's interaction with these snuggly forces of nature. The general consensus is that at the end of the day, this is a cute, fluffy children's story with barely any plot. And yes, the main plot of the film is quite straightforward, and you can take your May-aged daughter and she'll totally get it. And I see some of you have brought your May-aged daughters, so that's cool. When you start to watch this film as an adult, you can start to notice that there's a lot going on under the surface. There are many, many, many layers to this film. Just to give you a scope of how deep the rabbit hole goes, I once did a 60-minute talk just about the bus scene, so that's about how in-depth you can go with this film. So for today, I just selected 3 tiny, tiny, tiny topics, 3 layers: the personal mythology, the mirroring of Grave of the Fireflies, and trauma healing, so light and fluffy, as I said. So what is a Totoro, anyway? In all of his films, Miyazaki loves to play around with synthesizing story elements from all over the world, looking at mythologies and fairy tales and novels, recent and ancient, things he read as a child, things people were reading at the time he made the films. But the Totoro really has no direct predecessor in Japan. It's a brand new thing, for lack of a better word. And depending on when you ask Miyazaki about what a Totoro is, he'll give you a different answer. He's cheeky like that, especially when he wants you to come to your own conclusion. In his original project plan for the film, he writes that a Totoro looks like something between an owl, a bear, and a badger. Sort of. And then he goes on to write something more interesting, which is the Totoro are the goblins of the transitional phase when Japan hadn't become entirely modernized. It's a really interesting sentence. So these are liminal creatures, in-between creatures, who help the transition from one era of Japan to the next. And if you look at the film, we can see that the Totoro in its final version is a mixture of Japanese and Western elements. First, the Japanese ancient connections to the god Inari, who's one of the most ancient Japanese gods, god of agriculture and rice and fertility and blacksmiths and a number of other things. One of the most popular gods with around 30,000 shrines scattered all over Japan. Sometimes the god is male, sometimes it's female, sometimes it's androgynous. It's a shape-shifting god who is associated with the cycle of nature, and many times comes with a sword in one hand and a sack of rice in another. And you can see this connection with the iconography in the grains, the planting, the harvest, the natural cycle that Miyazaki put in the film, because he said he wanted people to again see the beauty of Japanese nature in the 4 seasons. Something that hasn't been covered a lot in Japanese animation. Both Grave of the Fireflies and Totoro are groundbreaking in how they look at the Japanese landscape. But the Inari connection is most directly made in the bus scene, if you pay attention, where Mei spots an actual Inari shrine with Kitsune, the mystical shape-shifting foxes that are Inari's messengers in the mythology. And for the ultimate synthesis of cultures, we have the cat bus, who looks pretty much like the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland, but also has the function that Inari's foxes sometimes have, is that the god travels on a large fox. And there you can see the parallel with the sword being replaced with the umbrella, and the sack of rice was a sack of grains that was just handed over to the children. And the reason I mentioned Alice in Wonderland is because the other element of Totoro is the Western fairy tale influences, and that starts with the name. Now, I don't know if you've seen it subtitled or with the dub or with the old dub or the new dub. There's a lot of version of this film in English. And in some of the dubs, Totoro is dubbed to be saying Totoro in this scene, and that is factually incorrect. Totoro just growls 3 times. We're going to listen to the original Japanese so you can pay attention to that when it happens. It's actually Mei who names the creature, and she names the creature by mispronouncing Tororu from the storybook that you can see a glimpse of in the end credits. And that book says 3 mountain goats, which refers to 3 billy goats gruff. It's a Norwegian fairy tale about 3 nice goats and a ferocious troll who wants to eat them. And then in this film we have the inversion of this story with 3 very nice trolls and 1 ferocious goat later in the film. So this makes the physical appearance of Totoro something these children personally know in their life, and comes from deep attachment to their mom. And can you guess the other stories that mom has been telling the children? Like the one where you follow White Rabbit and fall down a hole to a mystical world, or the other one where there's a magic caretaker who comes in with a flying umbrella to take care of children whose parents are otherwise occupied. So the Totoro becomes this mixture of a creature which signals the end of the extreme separation of cultures that was World War II in Japan. The war generation with its black and white thinking, us versus them, is gone. And these children who are in this story belong to the new generation, and for them there is no difference between the East and the West. And with that we move on to the more direct parallels with Grave of the Fireflies. Quick show of hands, how many of you seen Grave of the Fireflies? Okay, good amount. Who saw it last week here? Okay. Who came back specifically because I said to come back to see the connections with Totoro? Thank you. Very nice of you. Oh, I just spotted a large plush Totoro in the back. That's commitment. Thank you, Totoro, for watching your own. I mean, yeah, you gotta come back and watch your work sometimes. Okay. So the key thing to know about Fireflies and Totoro is that originally Totoro was meant to be a much shorter film, no more than 60 minutes tops, to play after Fireflies. And if you see these films as originally intended, view them pair, Grave of the Fireflies first, then Totoro, then Fireflies is the story of Japan as it happened, and Totoro is the story that should have happened. Fireflies is the reality of war in 1945, where people fight to survive every day, and then move into Totoro, which is a fantasy version of the 1950s, where everything is plentiful and abundant and just generally nice to live in. And I didn't know this. Anthropology professor Dr. Saya Shirishi told me a couple of years ago that the 1950s in Japan looked nothing like the film in Totoro. It looked much more like Fireflies. It's all a deliberate fantasy on Miyazaki's behalf. And if you view the film through this lens, seemingly innocuous moments in Totoro suddenly become statements of it could have happened like this as well. And the things that happen in parallel in both films add a lot of weight to the gestures, like giving someone food, or brushing hair, or playing hopscotch, or you can compare objects, what happens to them, like a box of candy, child's slipper, an umbrella. You can watch these films and just spot these. And for the children in Fireflies, even small things like running through the house is a desperate gathering of personal belongings before the air raid. In the same scene in Totoro, we have the children running through the house in a fun exploration. The house is trembling, ha, it's haunted, it's funny. In Fireflies, the same thing happens, and the house collapses in the bombing. It's all fun and games in Totoro. And in Fireflies, we see the mother who is lost and there is no replacement. There is attempts at replacing her, but all fail. In Totoro, the mother is lost and found, and between the two, she's always substituted by other protective characters. In Fireflies, the concept of family itself falls apart. Society is reduced to survival instincts, and Totoro, everyone is your family. The entire village takes care of you. The full village looks for one single child. That wouldn't have happened in Fireflies. Society is selfless and protective. Every path you follow in Fireflies leads to suffering and death, and every path you follow in Totoro leads to life and rebirth. So Totoro is an inversion in every sense. In Totoro's world, early childhood experience is not tainted by the war. You're free to play and explore, and it's a world where you look up and acorns are falling instead of bombs. It's a world where you watch the seeds you planted and just wait for them to grow instead of making a grave for the fireflies whose lives have tragically been cut short. So Fireflies is the confrontation film. Totoro is the release and the healing. Fireflies is what was, Totoro is what could have been and what can be. It all depends on what kind of society we, the viewers today, choose to build after we come out of the cinema. The reason for this starkly different approach is the backgrounds of the two directors and how they deal with the childhood trauma of living through World War II. Both of the directors, Miyazaki and Takahata, the director of Fireflies, were both children during the war. And Miyazaki has an anecdote about how Takahata grew up starving and Miyazaki grew up seeing his father give food to strangers. He was more privileged and sheltered from the utmost horror parts of the war. And this is an oversimplification, of course, but it's still reflected in the art that these two people grew up to make and the differences they put in their respective films. So Takahata's method of film therapy is to go through the trauma directly. If you were here last week, you know what I mean. You relive it as a story and heal through the catharsis that you are alive at the end and you can go back to your life. And Miyazaki, instead, is showing the children a world they can connect to. And at the same time, he's showing the adults how they can heal their inner child. This is actually going out to two audiences at the same time. It's not either or. Both are happening at the same time. It's a hero's journey and it's a form of therapy. You watch it happen to the characters, but it's happening to you as well. First you go into the darkness and process the darkness and come out of it. And then you watch Totoro and go into the light and plant the seeds of a better life, literally. With all this in mind, what's the ultimate inversion that Totoro can do? It's something that Fireflies can't show on screen because it's just too traumatic. But everyone knows it was there and it's happened. The ultimate singular point of national trauma in the Japanese psyche, the dropping of the atomic bomb. It's not on screen, it's sort of alluded to. It's not there in the story, but everyone knows it happened. So the question is, how can Miyazaki, this lifelong pacifist, invert that image, the one everyone knows of the mushroom cloud that is so traumatic you don't show it directly? Now, this is again something I wouldn't have come up with on my own. This also comes from Dr. Shiraishi, but I totally agree with it, and I'll show you and you'll see what you think. So remember how throughout Fireflies the bombs keep falling, and throughout Totoro acorns keep falling. Nothing grows out of bombs, obviously. Everything grows out of seeds. And what happens in one of the climactic points of Totoro is the most basic plant mythology. You plant the seed and then it grows and you see it happen on a massive scale. In Fireflies, the children witness total destruction. So in Totoro, the children witness total rebirth. And look at how that tree is growing. I don't know what you think. I can be persuaded that that tree is growing in the shape of a mushroom cloud. And if that is what is happening, that's the most genius thing that Miyazaki can do as an artist, because he's replacing the symbol. It's a symbol of death, and he's replacing it with a symbol of rebirth. A symbol of trauma is replaced with a symbol of healing. He's setting out to heal the single most traumatic experience of the Japanese psyche. And through it, if you're watching it, it is your childhood that is being healed for the entire generation who's watching this, who's Miyazaki's generation who grew up in the war. And you can, even today, even if you didn't grow up in the war, you can watch this film and go out there as an adult and do good work and help people so that this kind of thing never happens again. So watch the film with that in mind and see if your experience of it changes. And I'll see you after the film for discussion upstairs. Thank you. Hey, this is Adam from Follow the Moon Rabbit. If you like this talk, you'll be happy to know that there's more. Do note that not all of my stuff is video. I've got free ebooks and blog posts and a podcast is on the way. So to make sure you don't miss any of that, hop on over to followthemoonrabbit.com and join the Moon Rabbit Collective. It's completely free and you'll get my Studio Ghibli Secrets Guide as a welcome gift. So go on to followthemoonrabbit.com and sign up. See you there.